Okay. Okay, we can get going.
All right. I'll once again remind that we are recording this this meetup. So welcome to Delivery Leadership Meetup. I'm very excited to have Leslie here today. A little bit about the meetup is this last 3-4 years we are running this meetup and regularly, and we used to do that every month, but because of the COVID and all of that chaos, I stopped organizing regularly. But again, looks like we are coming back on track. It's a cold and gloomy day in Melbourne, but otherwise I'm feeling, well, I have this warm feeling because everyone is here. I know half of the people here, so that's a exciting feeling that I have. Otherwise, look, I'm also excited because we have people from, not from just Australia, we have people from the US, people from UK, people from, and Amerigo is from the other side of the world. He's from Portugal. So I'm quite excited to have him here. We also have people from India. So 60 odd people who signed up. I got a lot of messages that if we can record this meetup, because the timing doesn't suit them, but it shows you the excitement and shows you the interest that they have in this particular meetup. Now, a lot of people here, either they are the product managers or project managers. We are the agile coaches. So interest is in experimentation and innovation and how things are done. Some people are also from the startup company community, people like me and Leslie himself. We come with the entrepreneurial mindset, and so both of us have started the companies and sold and bought and now invested. So this is an exciting feeling that I have. So thank you very much for joining today. A little bit about the meetup, how we are doing it. So we will let Leslie run the presentation and do the talk. If you have any questions, please put them in the chat. I can see something is already in the chat, so that's awesome. Thank you, David. And so if you have any questions, then put them in the chat. And David, thanks for calling me awesome, man. Look, no one else says that, so that's good. So we will do the Q&A right after this, so that we have time to ask the questions, get the time spent on that, and we don't really derail the actual presentation there. We good with that? Yeah. Okay. Cool. So a little bit about Leslie, although he will tell more about himself. But so Leslie, I came to know about Leslie through one of the colleagues. He was the innovation manager at one of the companies here. I currently work for Microsoft, so we do a lot of the experiments as well. Every day there is some new product is coming up, new features are coming, and so Microsoft is of course a lot of innovation there. But Leslie, he is the CEO and founder of a company called Exponentially. Leslie, I will ask you why the name, but before I'll just give a brief introduction about yourself. So Leslie works with, he has worked with a lot of bigger companies here and local and international companies. I don't mind that at all. It's good to hear. So Leslie works with a lot of international and local companies, startups, and he is a startup founder and investor as well. And primarily, one of the things that has come from Leslie and what he is associated with is the idea or the concept of pretotyping. Now, pretotyping, I will let him explain, but pretotyping, basically, it came from Google, and then it was refined or perfected at Stanford University. So again, Leslie is associated with the person who created this idea or concept, Alberto Savoia. And Leslie, am I saying it correctly?
Alberto Savoia, that's fine, but I'll talk about him in a moment, so that's fine.
So Alberto, he has written a book called Write It, and it's a fascinating book. And another fascinating thing here is if you have the right engagement here, if you, and based on the engagement and everything else, I will let Leslie talk more about that, but there is a giveaway of the book. So and it's a fantastic book. So So that's one of the things here. Now, Leslie has worked for ThoughtWorks and Sportsbet kind of companies, and so I'm very excited to see this presentation and hear more about prototyping. And I know that as delivery leads, the concept is definitely going to help us. So, handing over to Leslie, most welcome.
Okay, thank you very much. Let me just get all my ducks in the row and screen share and get everything up where I can see all of you and engage with you. So can you see the presentation? Yes, okay, great.
Yes, yeah.
Okay, excellent. So thanks, Rajesh. The name Exponentially comes from something I made up at the airport on the way to San Francisco, going to figure out what I was going to do next. And it was a conference about exponential innovation, and it stuck. And I just use it because it's good to always think exponentially about everything we do, whether it's experimentation or life or whatever you're doing. So that's where it comes from. But thank you so much for having me. Thank you for those of you that are on the call. I appreciate you spending another hour staring at Zoom. It's great. And also thank you for responding to my clickbait title of Hacking Innovation, Google, all the wonderful words in there. But I hope to give you some value this evening. So as I just said, I'll be talking about the concept of prototyping, where it comes from, how we use it, what it is at a high level. I know being delivery leaders, you're probably more interested in the how and the real world than the theory. So I will take you through a whole bunch of real world examples. I'm going to try and leave some time, 20 or 30 minutes at the end, just to go through the questions, because as meetups, that's where all value lies. The value lies in actually the discussion that we have around these concepts. Feel free to ask me any question you like. You don't have to be kind. I'm happy to answer anything I can. And if I can't answer you, that's okay. Failure is part of what we do. Okay, so the way we're going to run it is like I just said, put chat in the questions. We'll do the Q&A at the end. Please stay on video if that's at all possible. It's just nicer to be talking to people than little black boxes. But if you can't, that's okay. And mute if you can. You obviously can make notes, but I will send you out a copy of the slides. So I'll give you all these slides unedited at the end. And if you stop hearing me or anything goes wrong, you can wave your hand or raise your hand or do something, and we'll be recording that. Okay. Cool. So let's get into it. So a little quick intro to me is I've built 5 startups. I've sold 2. I've completely obliterated 3 of them. So massive failure there. So I'm really good at failure. I've worked with a bunch of accelerator programs. So I've worked with around 2,000 startup founders around the world. I've worked with companies in Australia, Singapore, and in the US. And as you can imagine, lots and lots of product failure there. But importantly, I've done a lot of work in the enterprise space. So as Rajesh mentioned, I ran innovation at ThoughtWorks for a few years in Australia, at Sportsbet for a while, which is an interesting experience. And importantly, over the last 3 years, we worked with all of these companies. Now, this isn't the sales logo wall. The reason I'm showing you this is the complexity ranges from highly regulated financial services like banks and insurance companies, energy and resources, through to VR companies, Australian National University, retail, media, whatever. So prototyping works across all these environments. And it doesn't matter how big or small your organization is or how big or small your team is or the problem you're trying to solve. The common thread between these things is we're all trying to figure this out. How do we test ideas fast and discover products and services and business models that our customers love? Why? Because if they love them, they'll pay us money. If they pay us money, we have a business. It's really as simple as that. We can obviously market nonsense to them and get them to take things up on special offers, but that doesn't create a sustainable business model. So we're really trying to find this love factor. And this is how we typically do it. So if you're in any reasonable size organization, Yaz, free $10 million of McKinsey consulting without the other 400 slides. Basically, you have idea discovery of some sort. We validate ideas, we build them, we incubate them, we scale them, and ta-da, billion-dollar business. Except it doesn't work. And it doesn't work because we're really good at idea discovery. So that we've got nailed. We do hack days, customer interviews, technology scans, we talk to people, we do brainstorms, we do billions of post-it notes on the wall and talk to each other. Then what we do is we skip validation, or we do the worst possible thing. We dot vote on a couple of sticky notes, which is guessing. Then the person who guessed the best and the most convincing goes and asks for money. We lobby for money, we get $500,000, we build a proof of concept or an MVP, and then we scale the hell out of it before we've tested with customers, and then we have to make it work. And we will launch it to the market, and a lot of these fail. So I'm sure none of your projects fail in your organizations, but hypothetically speaking, a lot of these are failures, okay? And you're overcommitted to them, and you're betting your career on one idea. So the reason we do that isn't because we're incompetent. It's because that's the right thing to do when you're executing your business. You should be doing this. You should be thinking about scale and process and robustness. But it's the wrong way to discover solutions to customer problems. And so what we need to do is focus on discovery, not on execution. If you're building anything, you're actually not discovering. And I'll show you in a moment what I mean by that. So we reframe that to say, how do we discover solutions that solve customer problems 10 times better? Now, immediately as delivery leaders, you see 10x and you go, oh, buzzwordy nonsense. But it's really important, because what it means is the way Google frames their innovations is they go, if we're not reducing, how can we reduce friction out of our users' environment by 10 times? Like dramatically reduce friction. Uber reduces friction. Airbnb reduces friction. The flip side of that is every single problem has already been solved. And all we're trying to do is solve it 10 times better. If you don't have a compelling alternative, then people will continue solving the problem the same way. And we're in a competitive environment. So we've used this as a great filter to figure out, is this something, out of all the possible things we're doing, is this the thing we should be spending our time and money and resources on? So this all starts with wonderful, lovely ideas, and we brainstorm, we get all excited about ideas, but ideas are terrible. Like all ideas are really, really bad. So this comes from a talk that Astro Taylor did. So if you don't know Astro, that's his real name, great parents. His job is captain of moonshots, and he works for Google's innovation labs. And they've said, out of the thousands of ideas that they see, 99% of the ideas don't make it. And they know this as a fact. So their insight was that failure is the default outcome in this early stage of experiment or idea validation. And that's a really powerful thing to know. Because if you accept that failure is the default outcome, I'm not saying fail or die or failure is good or that failure is bad. Failure is not something we want to do. But failure in a structured way that teaches us something very quickly is really good in this state because it allows us to iterate very quickly and move through the process. So if that's true, what do we do about this? So we went to go and learn from these exponential innovators a few years ago and ignore the fact that they are massive technology companies. That's not the point. The point is that they're probably more complex than the company you're in right now in terms of geography, competition, funding, business models, all these kinds of things. So if they could figure something out, maybe there's something to learn. So the first lesson we learned is they're really good at building the right it, which is a term from Pretotyping, and it means product or service or business model or B2B, B2C, doesn't matter. So everything you see on the left has been on multi-billion-dollar success stories. So how then do the same people with the same resources and the same capability and the same companies build this junk on the right? So everything you see here has been a multi-billion-dollar failure. So how does this happen? Well, the way it happens is it doesn't matter how well we execute. It matters that the market cares. So maybe you want to figure, and that seems obvious in hindsight, but maybe you want to not spend $1 billion to figure out if anybody cares about your product or service. So the insight that Alberto Savoia, who created the method, the insight that he had isn't that 80% of new products or services fail. We all know that from Nielsen. It's even if competently executed. So if you think about your organization, what happens when a product or project fails or starts failing? We hire some people, we fire some people, we add more marketing dollars, we add more features, we do more user research, we pay more people to sit in a room and tell us whether they like a product or not, which is a bad way to test because what you're testing there is, do they like money? And the answer is yes, they love money. So just give them the money and leave them alone. So this is what happens. So it's really important that it's not necessarily about optimizing how well you execute at this phase. It's about validation. The other thing that we learned was we save $1 million each time we don't build something. Now, this sounds like made up nonsense, and it is, I made it up. But the reason I made it up was in one of my jobs, early 2016, the CEO said to me, what's our return on innovation investment going to be? So I said to him, $1 trillion. And he looked at me. So I said, okay, dollar. So I said, I'm lying. Like, I can't tell you. I've just told you everything I do is going to fail all the time. Like, I can't give you a number. So not the best way for job retention. So I went back to the drawing board, and we figured out if we start tracking every idea, that the value of execution of every idea that we kill, it becomes a really powerful number, and it adds up very, very quickly. And this, in hindsight, has proved to be really smart, because what we do, and there's a method for this, is to go and look at, before we start doing anything, what would it cost to execute this fully loaded? And we have a sense of that generally. And then when we run experiments on it, and we would have done it when we kill it, we bank that money. And luckily we've been doing that, because so far, what we've been able to track with our customers is we've saved $24 million in the last 3.5 years with the customers that we've been working with on their behalf. So how do we do this? Well, first of all, this is not about beanbags and headsets and scooters and all the nonsense that we do around innovation. That's great for culture. That's not necessarily the way you solve the problem. The way we solve the problem is answer the question, what is the least amount of tools and process that we need to do this in a rigorous and structured way that we believe? And because nobody wants a new tool in their life. So we settled on the lean canvas and prototyping. I'm not going to the lean canvas this evening, but with the lean canvas, all we're doing is there's so many people thinking about why this is good for your business, why an idea is good for your business, that we want a mechanism to force them to think about the customer. From a customer perspective, why is this good? And it's a great filter for ideas. So we use this quite rigorously and extensively. And then prototyping, obviously, to validate everything that's on the lean canvas, which is just all of our made up pie in the sky assumptions. So the way you do this is relatively straightforward. What you do is, most companies I'm working with are testing between 4 and 8 ideas with customers. And at that rate, 99% failure rate, you get very little chance of succeeding. So easy, you test 10 times more ideas. Not so easy. Think about in your organization, if you're testing 1 idea, what would it take to test 10? If you're testing 10, what would it take to test 100? Everything changes. How you fund it, how you test it, what your process is, how you collaborate with different areas of the business. What about risk and legal? How do you test on live customers? How do you find them? All that stuff changes. So enter prototyping. So Google talks about this as the prototyping zone. And really what we're aiming for a method that allows us to test ideas in weeks for a few $100s instead of months for tens or hundreds of thousands of dollars by building proof of concepts. And this also sounds like nonsense. So I can attest to the fact we've run over 1,000 prototypes directly with customers. And I'd say 95% of the time, because we track the data, obviously, data over opinion, is 95% of the time we can get an experiment out the door in 2 weeks for around $100 per experiment. My hardest job is to convince companies to only spend $100 and to not spend $10,000. It's much harder to get $10,000 or $20,000 or $30,000 out of companies than to get them to spend so little. So we're really trying to increase experiment velocity, and because we know most of them are going to fail, so we can find good ones and decrease the cost and the effort involved. So let's talk about prototyping. So Alberto is worth talking about. He was the first engineering director at Google back in the day. He left to start a business. In 2007, Larry Page called him up and said, we need to figure out a way to test rapidly. They put a team together of smart people. They created prototyping, so you can blame him for the new word, of course, not me. He then went on to teach this at Stanford University. And I've been working closely with Alberto since November 2015 on this and bringing this to Australia and this part of the world. It is a real thing. So Alberto has worked directly with all of these companies, which you'll recognize, and they deploy this method. So what is it? So what prototyping is designed to do is to make sure you build the right it before building it right. And the obvious question, particularly for this group, I imagine, is what's the difference between a prototype and a prototype? So a prototype is trying to answer the question, can we make this thing? The answer is yes. It's 2021, we can make everything. We don't have to answer the question, it's redundant, okay? We have to ask, should I make this thing in the first place? Should I build it? The way we answer that, or the way we frame that, is we ask ourselves, how can I test market demand for $0 in 24 hours with our customers? Now, can you do that? Of course not. I don't mean it literally, but if it currently takes you a month to test something, how do you do it in 2 weeks? If it takes you 2 weeks, how do you do it in a week? The way we do this is we teach you a bunch of experimentation techniques, some of which you'll recognize, to be able to try and get data versus opinion. The reason we teach you the techniques is if you go to someone, you say, run an experiment. The first thing they do is they fire up MailChimp or SurveyMonkey or Qualtrics or something, and they send out a survey. And what do you get back from a survey? Opinion. We don't care about opinion. We want data. So the principle of prototyping, we're designed to get data over opinion from people. We don't ever want to ask someone, do you like this thing? Or would you like one of these? Or please express interest. We want to present something as real and measure what they do versus what they say. What do we mean by data? Data is skin in the game. And skin in the game is any of these. It's attention, it's time, it's commitment, it's money, it's information. It's some way of getting someone to take an action based on something you put in front of them. It can be as simple as an email. It can be as complex downstream as selling them something, selling the customer something. What skin in the game is not is 100 or 1,000 Facebook likes. There's zero effort to do that. It's not a million YouTube views. It's maybe a subscribe to YouTube channel, as an example. It's an email response. It's not a, hey, will you like to come to our meet, or not a meetup group because you've got skin in the game literally, yeah? But would you like to come to our market research thing where we give you money to do a thing? You're testing the wrong stuff there. So the way we do it at a very high level is the process of prototyping is we go from an idea through to a lean canvas to filter out the customer perspective only, not the business perspective. We then figure out what is our key market hypothesis. So what are we trying to prove or disprove? And I'll give you some examples in a moment as a statement. Then the heart of prototyping is this XYZ hypothesis. So we're trying to state this as, say this as a number. So how do we know before we even start, and this is key, what good looks like? So what percent of which people will do what behavior? So that we don't create that whole downstream nonsense of you go off, you run an experiment, you come back, we go, yeah, we've got 10,000 people did the thing. Why is that good? Maybe it should be 1 million, maybe it should be 4. We don't know. Or you go, we ran this experiment, we came back and they didn't like it. And the boss goes, yeah, but wrong customers, or run it again, or try the blue one. You've got nothing to ground yourself in. So what we do is we first set the baseline of what good looks like. And then we measure ourselves consistently against that by running multiple experiments. We then do what we call a hyper zoom, which is basically just what is the smallest testable component we can run tomorrow morning. We select a prototype method based on which one's the easiest to do. We run a few prototypes and we make a decision if that idea is validated or not. So what is XYZ? So XYZ is what is the minimum percent of the target market that will take action for the product? And we don't have a huge amount of time, so there's a whole conversation around how do you get to that X, but believe me, we can do it. So a made up example of that would be at least 5% of luxury sedan buyers in Australia will buy Tesla Model 3 in 2021. That's completely testable, verifiable, and manageable, and it either passes or it fails. So as a summary quickly before I go into some examples, really what we're trying to do is present an idea as real to customers to measure what they do versus what they say. We're trying to measure the customer demand with the end state of what a potential product looks like without building any technology, which is key. There's a bunch of companies that do this really, really well. Some of them I've showed you on the right there. So what I'm going to do now is just switch gears and go into some experiments and some samples. So everything I've said to you now can be argued is my opinion and not data. So being a data over opinion person, like I said, we've run 1,000 prototypes. So you can ask me any questions around this. I thought I'd select, the first one is, there's a method called the mechanical Turk, which you're probably familiar with. So being people whose job it is to make and build technology, this is heresy. I'm saying don't build anything. And the way we get around this is we use a mechanical Turk. So we use humans to simulate the technology to avoid us running down the road of wanting to make things robust in terms of process and scalability and fail-proof and bulletproof and all these things before we even know anybody cares. The simplest example of this, and a real example, March 2016, Facebook launched the Facebook AI chatbots, and I'm sure you remember that. So the answer to every technologist was, let's make chatbots, because we need a chatbot. That's the dumbest reason on earth to ever build a piece of technology, okay? Like, what's the customer problem we're solving? How are we solving something for them that's 10x better than the way they're currently solving it? So what we did is we churned around a little bit. We put together a lean canvas, and we found a problem that looked like this technology could potentially solve it. And the idea, if we had gone off and built this, because there was a lot of momentum in the business and people wanted to do this, we'd have spent about $500,000 in 6 months to get this up and running and through the roadmap, if we got it on the roadmap and tested and scalable and all this jazz. So we prototyped it in 4 days. Day one, as we put together our hypothesis, and the hypothesis was what you see there, X% of companies, of customers will do a thing. And day two, we mocked up a fake chatbot on Facebook. We put together a Q&A in a spreadsheet of what they potentially would ask us and expect. We then invited 100 of our VIP customers on a Saturday morning to look at this thing. And eventually got Josh, so we called the Josh bot internally because he drew the short straw on a Saturday morning, to pretend to be the chatbot and engage with the customers. Good thing we did this. 8 minutes later, we failed. We were completely wrong. We missed the boat. We absolutely loved this idea. The exec loved the idea. We were prepared to throw money at this. We were completely wrong. We had no idea what the customer wanted. So if you think about it, in 4 days and 8 minutes, we saved $500,000. Now, that is very real, because what would have happened if we hadn't prototyped it? We would have taken that specification, we'd have bloated the hell out of that and created more features and crammed all the likes and the loves and all the focus groups and made it pink and yellow and green and all the things and lobbied for it. We would have gone out on RFPs, we would have consumed resources in the business, we would have bumped other projects, so there's opportunity cost, and we would have executed this 6 months later. So that was a very real saving, very quick example of how this works. Now, obviously you don't stop this. You go back, speak to the customers, run more prototypes. And eventually after 4 or 5 prototypes, we got led by the failures to find out exactly what they did want and eventually launched some very successful products into the market. So that's a very simple example of Mechanical Turk and a prototype that was super valuable immediately. The next one was one that Alberta did in the US. So McDonald's, some brainy person came with the idea, let's do Mac Spaghetti. That sounds gross, and I saw a few of you go like, yeah, maybe that's not a good idea, but that's just our opinion. So really what they did was prototype it. So they went, okay, they knew, I've made up to 20%, of course, but they know what good looks like inside their business when they launch a new flavor and a new product. So what they did is they mocked up a box that's not real of Mac Spaghetti. They got an offer in front of 100 of the customers in the right area with the right demographic. They ran the prototype in a day. And luckily for us, only 2% of people took up the offer. Now, obviously, they didn't fail it immediately because of the scale of McDonald's. They got millions of customers. Over a week, they got this in front of only 1,000 customers. So they ran 10 prototypes in different areas with different variations of this. And they killed the idea. And that's super powerful because out of all the possible things they could do, they stopped doing this based on that sample size. Remember, we're going for best case scenario. So we're not trying to test statistical significance at this early stage. We're trying to go, if we can't even get 100 people to do this, or 2 people or 10 people to do this, we need to stop and go back to the drawing board. So that's the power of doing this. Another great prototyper is Domino's Australia. So if you speak to Don May, he met Alberta, I think it was early 2015 as well, and immediately flicked their business model across to test these things. So it used to cost, he said this publicly at a conference, it used to cost them millions of dollars to get a new pizza flavor out. So to do all the market research and flavor testing and all that. Now what they do is they've got a few stores that they demarcate as prototyping stores, where they very simply add a new flavor onto the menu. And I just made up pineapple pizza lovers because it's controversial, but they put a new flavor on the menu and they measure how many people order that. And the best skin in the game on earth is a customer coming up to you and giving you money for a thing. And then what they do is the Mechanical Turk it. So they make it bespoke for their customer. There's no harm done. The customer doesn't even know that it was an experiment. They get the product that they want and they measure these over time. And eventually they promote those onto the main menu. And they do this very actively And they do this across their whole business in multiple areas. So very big fans of prototyping. And then another example is we did some work with RACQ up in Queensland, insurance company. And we spent 3 weeks with their team there. We ran about 18 experiments with them. And there were a bunch of ideas that had been on the back burner for ages. So one of them was, and he spoke about this in the financial review, so I can speak about it, was mobility as a service. So the idea, and it's in all insurance companies, they all go, people would love something where there's an end-to-end trip management. So what we do is from when you leave the house, we'll like book your Uber, and then we'll book the tram for you, and then we'll book for the train and the whole journey and map that out for you. We tested the hell out of this thing because they loved it and they wanted to invest in it. We couldn't give people free money to take this offer. Like they did not care. No one was slightly interested in this. So it was a really good example, once again, of stopping something. And I know I've spoken a lot about stopping things. There's a lot of examples of customers where they validated these ideas and they've actually gone on to get really good results. So there were a bunch of examples there with RACQ. And then the last of the examples before I go to the next section is we did some work with RACV, another big national insurance company for those that are not from Australia. We worked with their team, ran 14 ideas, 38 experiments in a 3-week period. And I love these quotes like, customers absolutely don't do what they say. They lie to you all the time. Facts don't care about your opinion, and you can absolutely get data within 24 hours. AGL Energy, we've just done a case study on them. They've run 1,000 experiments last year. We trained them 2 years ago. They've saved $7.5 million, which is a significant number, by not building the wrong thing. And they're aiming to do 2,000 years. And I love this quote, which they say, each test we run makes us smarter as a company because we're learning so much directly from our customers. Okay, so I'm nearing the last section now. So that's all wonderful, but why do you care? So I'm not coming to you and saying, you know, here's a new hammer, like, so everything is to look like a nail. The answer to every question is not prototyping. But where it's valuable and where we've seen it is it doesn't live in a silo. So you have an existing process in your business. So whatever you call it, you'll have some way of discovering customer problems, and it could be human-centered design or one of these techniques. You have a way of exploring possible solutions. And then often what happens is we jump across to using a proof of concept or build through lean startup or agile or one of these techniques to test these ideas. So the only question we're asking is like, if you have a way to run experiments currently, and by run experiments, I don't mean talk about them endlessly or design them or map them out or design the POC. I mean, run experiments live with customers that you can validate the actions with data, then prototyping works. If you know the answer to the question, so where it doesn't work is like if you want to build a bridge, like don't prototype that. We know how to build bridges. You know the answer, you know the question, you know the answer, go and execute. But if you go, we have a problem, we have multiple potential solutions, we're not sure which one the customer would like, this works really well. Why? You protect your career and your reputation because you don't have to bet your life on one idea and drive it through the process and nurture it and pretend that it's working, even if you know it's dying horribly in the ditches. You can stop these things and kill them very, very quickly. If someone pushes back on you and says, you know, the experiment isn't good, you can say, great, just run it again tomorrow or in a week's time. So we can do that. And we've seen in the real world that the quality of proof of concepts and the quality of what comes out the end and what we build is a much higher chance of success because we've done this bit of work and validation upfront before we jump across to executing things. What I'm not saying here on this call, absolutely, is I'm not saying HCD and design thinking is nonsense and it's bad. It's absolutely valuable to understand what customers want, how they behave. What I'm saying is it's not the best method to test whether a customer is going to actually take this thing up and do something with it and validate that. So how do we help do this? So typically where we engage is we'd work after idea generation, before the proof of concept. We work with companies, we help them, we train companies and the team on how to do this over a day. We then often roll into like a 2-week rapid experimentation sprint, which means working on real ideas with your team, with your business to prove that the method works inside the business. Then we'll support you afterwards. We've built a tool that manages experiments and ideas because our first prototype of this was a very horrible, complicated Google sheet, which instantly became a nightmare because the complexity of multiple people working on multiple ideas with multiple experiments with different data coming in gets very complicated. So we figured out a way to do that in a structured way, because contrary to popular belief, innovation in this early stage is not a random fun thing to do. It's a very rigorous, disciplined process where we've seen with our customers that have been doing this for ages, like Australian National University and PEXA and AGL, create the discipline and do it week after week, and just discipline and execute and execute and execute and drive the data. If you want to learn more at a personal level, as I start wrapping up, there's a few ways to do it. There's a few tools. So there's the book from Alberto, The Right It. It's worth a read if you want to understand more about this. The free way to learn is we've got a Slack channel where Americo and a few of the other people on the call are in. There's around 400 people in there from around the world that are excellent prototypers. They've been practicing it for ages. Alberto's in there. There's guys from Google, Glass, and all over the place doing this stuff. It's a lot of good information and lessons in there. Thanks to COVID lockdown, you have a fine online prototyping self-paced course that I've put together because it was very difficult to do these workshops. So that's available to you if you want to learn there. And I've put together like a discount code for that if you want, which we'll send out afterwards. I'm trying not to sound too salesy, but I just want to inform you that this stuff is available. I'm sorry about that. And then, as I wrap up and before we take questions, I want to give you the chance to win a copy of The Right It. And it would be remiss of me to not get some skin in the game, given that I need to practice what I preach. So the way you enter to get a chance to win the book is leave some feedback on this talk, if it's been valuable or not, or whatever. Always happy to learn at this link, which we'll also distribute after the talk and which will be in the deck. And I think with that, before we offer questions, this is what we're trying to achieve. I love this quote from Netflix. They say, make sure that the best ideas win in your organization, not the most opinionated people. And that's really what we're trying to achieve here. So thank you very much for your attention, and probably over to you, Rajesh, on any questions.
Sure, thank you. Thank you so much for this great presentation. I really enjoyed all the examples and how, especially the XYZ or XYZ. So we have a question from David. David, do you want to ask the question or do you want me to ask the question?
Yeah, no, it's all good. I don't mind. Yeah, I guess the graphic that you showed sort of had prototyping as its own thing, but from the original paper back in 2011, wasn't the Palm Pilot example more about making sense of the need in the first place? Like it failed to build a PDA, 10 years before, and he was actually using this to understand the problem better and understand the actual situational need better. And that in itself could be used, in design thinking or, in any form of analysis and yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. So the Palm Pilot, we use that a lot as an example. So I've actually been to visit that prototype, by the way. So there's a little block of wood with a piece of paper stuck on it and a chopstick as a stylus in the Computer History Museum in Mountain View. And because I don't have a life, I went to go and visit it as the first prototype. But to your point, it's one of the techniques that we do use, the mechanical Turk, the Pinocchio method. And the Pinocchio is really, if you've got a physical product or service and you want to understand more about it, how would you go about figuring that out, figuring out what the need is, and iterating rapidly on that physical product? A personal example of that is around 2014, I've been obsessed with tracking exercise my whole life, and they launched the Pebble Watch, and the Pebble Watch came out and we did the wrong thing. We went, great, let's go and build an app and we can use the Pebble Watch to track exercise and all the rest of it. And we stopped ourselves and we said, great, hang on a sec, let's prototype it. So what we did is we used to go and we cut out a little interface, we stuck it on the Pebble Watch, we used to go down to the gym and tap on it and mess around, and you realize very quickly, like as Mike Tyson says, everyone's got a plan until you get punched in the face. Like make first contact with the enemy, which is the customer, and everything breaks. So we iterated rapidly on that, and we got to a point where we actually launched the product, and the Apple came along and killed us. So I hope I'm answering your question, but yes, it is one of the techniques, and it's very valid when you've got a physical product or service.
Yeah, it's great.
Okay.
All right, Luke, do you have anything? So you're saying that you went to the museum and saw the Palm Pilot. Actually, I used to own a Palm Pilot a long time back.
A lot of us did.
Yes. Yeah. So any other questions before I ask one question?
Luke said he's also been to see the Palm Pilot, which is great. So there's two weirdos.
So Leslie, one of the questions, and I think one of the meetup members asked when she joined, and she was asking, how can people use or convince management to use Pretotyping?
Excellent question. So the reason we show that, so the money slide for your boss is we save $1 million each time we don't build something, because leaders think about two things, like non-organic growth and saving money. So how do we convince leaders? We get in front of, this doesn't work if we don't get in front of leaders, first of all. So where we've gone to organizations and they go, let's train some prototyping, we all have a good day and it'll be fun and we all feel good and we're innovators and all that jazz, like it just fizzles away. When we get in front of leaders, we take them through a shorter version of this, which just says to them, like, how are you currently testing your ideas? And how do you quantify it? And how do you get a number? And do you believe the number? And that's the starting point. The second thing is to go, we save money by not building things. And it's a super powerful point. It's quite real. The third way is to go, what is your rigorous process to measure and structure and create these new and discover these new successful products, which everyone's trying to do. So it's a combination of those things. The most powerful thing, quite frankly, is if it works for Google, why would it work for you? You know, I know that sounds salesy again, but that's the truth. The truth is we've got a track record of doing this. It works at scale. It works in organizations. It's robust. We've got evidence that it works. It's rigorous. It's measurable. It's quick. It's cheap. All those things. So I hope I've answered that question.
Yeah. Thank you.
I've got a question. I'm just imagining, and well, I'm trying to imagine a really radically different product, a space that is very different. And then I think about the change adoption sort of curve and how you've got your early adopters who might be interested, but when it's really radically different, you're not going to have much interest anyway. I'm wondering how this copes with something that would be very much like that, where really until you get quite a long way down the path, you wouldn't really expect people to buy in.
So you're talking about the iPad argument, which is Steve Jobs going like, hey, we made an iPad and we went and asked people about an iPad and they wouldn't have wanted one because they didn't know that they want one, potentially.
Yeah, that would be a good candidate. Yep.
Yeah, that's a good candidate. So I don't believe for a second that Steve Jobs sat in a room on a mountain with his legs crossed, rubbing his chin, coming up with an iPad. I think what they did is they iterated and they tested and they did a lot of testing to figure out what this looks like. I also believe that you can always test. Look, you'll have radical left of field products. Does prototyping work for that? Probably not, because you'd have to reveal your patent or some smart thing about it. So that's probably what I think. But also, I believe you can distill any problem down to the essence of what is the problem you're solving for a customer, what solution, how can you simulate a solution that they may potentially need so you can understand and inform what you need to do next. So I think that's the essence of it, is the method forces that kind of thinking, which is what is the simplest possible thing we can test to validate the biggest problem that the customer has, and if we're solving it relative to other people. Okay.
Interesting thought. Yeah, I think it could be an interesting conversation with quite a few people, trying to dice it, like slice it down to that granularity, but yeah, worth a try.
Well, we've done that. We do this a lot. So in the enterprise space, by the time they bring us in, they'll have, the thing is so complicated. It's like what we need is we need a portal and need to do all these things and consolidate the systems and train all the people. And then we need to launch a rocket and add Bitcoin and crypto. It's that kind of conversation, which is crazy. And we go, great, like, where's the customer? What does the customer want? Why should we be the person solving the problem for the customer? Are we the uniquely placed on the planet to solve this better than anybody else? And why should we play the game? And once again, what problem has the customer got? Often the customer problem is nowhere near the solution, okay? Then we just step away, because then you just go do it because you're doing it for a strategic reason or some other reason. But if you drill hard enough and you push hard enough, you always start with what's the customer problem? What's the individual problem? Not what is the group of customers? So we're not saying people, I'm a SpaceX fan, so people who love space want to ride in a rocket. We're not saying that. We're saying I would like one day to be able to afford a trip to suborbital space in the next 10 years before I die. So it's from my perspective, not the generic mass herd perspective. And that way we always get down to the simplest possible thing that we're solving. Yeah.
Just another question, sort of down at the team level. If you've got a software engineering team who are doing some form of hypothesis-based development at the moment, and maybe the problem that they're trying to solve does have a few more boundaries around it, it doesn't seem like it's that much of a leap of faith then to do this style of work without really necessarily needing senior, organizational buy-in. Do you think that's true in your experience?
I think it's absolutely true. So the reality is, in the beginning, when you engage with customers, it's typically working with teams that are product teams that are building stuff, and it's typically continuous improvement. So someone will say, we need to optimize another reporting function, or the way we take payments, the way we do something. And with those teams, if they're empowered to stand up experiments and they're not constrained by governance or risk or legal or technology to actually run experiments, and we can get in front of a customer. Now, remember, a customer can be an internal person too. So we've had a lot of cases where there'll be internal systems servicing the business, or the help desk will have help desk as a goldmine for prototyping, because they're making contact with customers all the time. So sorry, I don't want to stray off your point. So to your point, absolutely. So if the team is empowered and you want to do, remembering the rule, which is there's a problem, there's multiple potential solutions. We don't know what the right solution is. So we want to test on customers to figure out what the solution is, and then learn based on the result of that test. Then absolutely right, you can do that. Yeah.
Fantastic. And that's an amazing suggestion about the help desk too. I know that should have been obvious, but yeah, you've just given me a light bulb moment there.
Great. We've had a lot of success in call centers, because the people that are the most neglected are generally the people paid the worst and the most neglected are the people that are making contact with the customer constantly. And they know the problems. So they'll go like, why the hell am the customer phones, I'm opening Teams and I'm opening Excel and I'm opening the knowledge base and I'm opening this thing, and I got to send John a message because he's a subject matter expert, and come back. Meantime, the customer's shouting at me. Why are we doing these things? So we run experiments. We go, okay, how would you solve this problem? And we empower them to run the experiment. We just say, there's a few guardrails, like don't do stupid things, don't break stuff, and sort that out. And you'll be amazed what they come up with, because they know the answer. We're just not listening to them. And we don't listen to them because they're talking and they don't have power. But with prototyping, there's no talking. We're just going like, what's the hypothesis? What's the experiment? What's the data? The data says yes. Why wouldn't we do this? So it's a great equalizer and a great leveler of hierarchy in an organization too. Yeah.
Thanks, Leslie. We have a question from Ian. And Ian, do you want me to read it out?
Yeah, I'm happy to read it out. I think I know the answer before we start, but I think with the answers with more experimentation. But I guess product awareness, we talked about Domino's Pizza example, where, we created a new pineapple pizza and we put it in a few stores. It didn't sell well. Idea was canned. But what if it could have been a good idea? It just didn't have good product awareness. Like we didn't have good marketing, or we didn't have information with that in front of the customer. Maybe it would have been taken up. Like, how do you sort of break that down in this prototyping?
You answered it already. Multiple experiments. So what we're trying to do, remember, we're not trying to find the thing. In reality, most of us aren't in a startup environment going, we want to launch a Uber. Okay, we're in an environment which is there's hundreds of ideas competing for attention, and we're trying to eliminate the bad ones very quickly and focusing on the good ones. So what they're trying to do is not find the pizza flavor. They're trying to go, we're going to try 10. okay? And they're competing with each other. And typically what happens is, one way to do it is you go design the perfect marketing campaign and you launch it and it fails. Okay, you've had one shot. The prototyping way is you take your best guess and you go, we're going to market it this way. It fails. Why did it fail? Wrong demographic. Okay, tweak the demographics, run it again. Okay, right demographics. They don't want yellow pineapple, they want blue pineapple. Okay, let's try blue pineapple. Let's try a different message. So each time we're getting informed incrementally by the experiment to meander our way to get things in front of them that work. Probably the best answer I can give you.
Yeah, great, thanks.
Okay.
Thank you. That was a good response. Very, very good response. Next one is.
I'm glad you approve, Rajesh.
I learned something. Yeah. Thank you. We got the next question from Asim. Asim is here. I will read it out. So how would you put prototyping in a scenario of internal product or internal products where pretty much the directors or MDs mandate the teams build X? Yeah, for example, build mobile app, business applications.
Okay, so this is the boss coming in and going like, I was overseas on a business trip and I saw this app that does this thing and I think we should do one. So in prototyping, when we go through the training, there's a concept of OPD versus Yoda, other people's data versus your own data. And the whole of prototyping is designed for Yoda. So other people's data is, I saw this thing somewhere else, we should do one. That is the worst possible way to decide because it's a different place, a different demographic, different set of people, different buying patterns, different companies, got nothing to do with your company. What you need to figure out is for your own company, for your own customers, for your own demographics, for your own products, why would you do this thing? So you tell your boss that, he laughs at you, says, that's great, I don't care, make one. Okay, so that's the problem. The way we solve it, we say, what we want you to do is, so that we're clear, can we spend 30 minutes and build a lean canvas together so that we understand that we're on the same page? Why? Because there's 19 of us on this call. If I say coffee app right now, there's 19 different versions in our heads of a coffee app. If we have a 30-minute conversation around lean canvas, there'll be one version and we'll understand what we mean by it. So you go, great, let's do that. And most people who are reasonable will be happy to do that. Once they've done that, we go, great. Now we understand what the customer problem is and the solution. Can you give us a week to go and test if that's true? Because we want to build the right thing for the customer. And very few reasonable people will say no to that request because we've been very specific about what we're trying to test, how we test it, and how we execute. If they're still obstinate and say no, then the other golden question is, happy to do it. I'm not that you have a choice. Sometimes you don't have a choice, then you just do it. But if you do have a choice, happy to do it. But what data do you have to prove that that this will solve a problem for our customers? Show me the data. Show me the numbers. People don't like that. And they'll squirm and wiggle and quote like all sorts of fancy reports and Google Trends and all sorts of nonsense up into the right curves. And you just keep pushing, like, show me the number, show me the number. And we've had this in many cases where I can hardly talk about it. Like they spend millions of dollars on something that's got 40 customers and they don't know why they did it because the CEO saw something and said, we need to make one of these things. So all I can come back to is go, you don't directly go, that's just your opinion, show me the data, because you'll be out on the street. And you don't try this technique at home either, it doesn't work. That's just your opinion. But basically, get down to the data in the best possible way you can. So always ask, like, we need to do this. How do we know? What's the number? What's the number? The data is not that we've had a focus group with 8 people and 60% of them loved the thing, because that means, I don't know, 5 or 4 people love the thing. The data is run an experiment. That's the best way I can answer that, I think. And if I have missed the question, Asim, please jump in and correct me. Okay.
It looks like you answered the question. So Irene, your question?
I have.
Yeah, I'm very good.
Leslie, I've been designing a prototyping service, and I'm looking for idea creation, and market entry in the startup lifecycle. I would like to understand from your real experience, the challenge and the barriers to implement prototyping by solo entrepreneurs, people who just have an idea and they want to build their business case and they want to build their pitch. Well, I see an opportunity to offer them prototyping as a way to show skin in the game. I would like to understand from your perspective and your real use case, barriers and challenge you have when working with this kind of profile.
Yes,
profile, because that's my people. That's very, very, very small entrepreneurs, people who have ideas. Usually they don't have money, so they have to bootstrap. They have to put the money of their own savings in their families. And I want to understand what kind of barriers you have found and challenge you have during implementing prototyping with them.
Great question. So what I've been doing over the last 3 years is working with Slingshot Corporate Accelerator in Australia, which works with big companies, airlines, insurance companies, breweries, etc. And I've been working with they recruit between 5 and 10 startup companies and scale-up companies into these programs. And I ran a session with them on day 2 talking about prototyping. So scale-up companies are easy to work with. Startup companies are easy to work with because it's a passionate founder who's got an idea, who wants to do something. So because they're resource constrained, they want to figure out the best possible way to test the idea. They're very difficult to work with because they love the idea and it's their baby and they don't want to know that the answer sometimes is no. Nobody likes your baby. Okay, it's a bad example to use on the call because there's babies, yeah, but sorry. So basically, it's very challenging to work with them because they will believe you very quickly. They're capable and able and have full control of the environment end to end to be able to run experiments on live customers. But they're very worried about their brand, which is non-existent. So you don't have a brand as a startup. Nobody cares, which is your power. They're much more able to run risky experiments like the fake door, where you pretend you've got something and you don't, which is harder to do in an enterprise. They move really quickly, but I've found it very difficult to get them to continue using prototyping because of the discipline. And they've got so many competing priorities. So what you need is someone, and I don't know how you would do this, but someone who holds them accountable in a way that's either part of their board or that they're paying to hold them accountable to run those experiments and measure and manage that outcome and believe the results. Because as we know, like you need to test these things in a rigorous way and believe the results. So it's been really difficult to do that. The other thing is for skin in the game, they don't have money, so they can't pay you, which is a problem. But I'm sure there's ways to get around that. In terms of scale-up companies, by that I mean a company that's been in business maybe a year or two, they're making some money, they've got a team of 5 to 10 people. In Australia, that's a scale-up company. In the US, they're much bigger. They are very difficult to deal with because they don't want to know that the idea is wrong. And often when you come to the business, they think you're telling them your idea is wrong, and you're not. You're going, out of all the possible things you could do, test it, and we'll figure out the right way to execute. So your core idea and vision is right, but how you execute, you're busy trying to find product market fit. And this is an excellent way to find product market fit, problem solution fit as well. So I've had one founder who we worked with for quite a while, and she came to me and she said, I'm terrified to run this prototype. I've raised $2 million. I've got a team of like 10 people. I don't want to know that this thing doesn't work. I'd rather not know the answer than actually run these experiments. And we got her over the line. So they're excellent because they have control over the environment in summary, but they're very difficult because they love the idea. And what you're trying to do with prototyping is break that love. And the best way I found to do with them is, like I said, keep them on the core vision, but then test the different features and components and subsets of that. Does that help?
Yeah, absolutely. So the best setting in the life cycle is growth, or later in acquisition, or when they become corporation.
I think you want something you want a company that's reasonably funded and that is making revenue that can afford you. So I think the filter will be, will they pay you money to do this, and will it be enough money to run your own business? Because, you know, you could teach them credit, and I don't know, this is the filter that I would use, because if they're not committed and they're not putting skin in the game and it's significant, then they're not going to hold themselves accountable. So you want some lever that gets them to hold themselves accountable. And that's typically in the growth phase. In the very early stage, I do a lot of work with early stage founders. You do it almost pro bono because, you know, you love startups and you want them to succeed. Yeah.
Yeah, I have a couple of people who approached me with that idea. Well, they don't committed themselves with the experiments and with the purpose, and you end by closing collaboration even just a couple days later, because there is no commitment.
That's it.
Well done. One last question. All prototypes I applied, all of them turned out to be a failure, and I never understood why. I never understood why, really, because that's such a beautiful idea, such a very well designed, and why I never understood why. It's a bit blind approach. You just get a number. It works or not. You don't understand the why. Do you have any kind of solution to understand the why not?
Yes.
That is not strictly based on prototyping.
So I think you need to, that's why I showed that process slide. So I don't think it lives in isolation. So I think you're constantly jumping between quantitative and qualitative results. So what we do with getting the number is we go, has this passed or failed? And then we always get the team together again and we go like, why has this idea failed? What is the lessons that we've learned? So we go, someone from marketing might say, well, it wasn't pretty enough. And I'm sorry to marketing people, I'm not putting in that box, but you know, it didn't look good enough to the customer, appealing enough. Then we go, okay, let's run another prototype and figure out if that's true. So then we're testing exactly the same experiment, but with slightly adjusted marketing. If it fails again, we go, okay, what have we learned this time? Well, we've learned maybe we got it to the wrong group, or the messaging was wrong, or the pricing was wrong. And we run multiple experiments. That's why you're running 4 or 5 or 6 or 7 of these things. And you will understand why very quickly. Sometimes you can do everything and it just flatlines. And then you should just stop and go, okay, I don't understand why. People are crazy. They don't do what they say they're going to do, and you move on. And often what we do is if an experiment fails, it's okay to ask people's opinions after you've run the experiment and go back to them. Like we did on the chatbot with Sportbet. We went, when it failed, we picked up the phone on the Monday and we would say, hey, thank you for taking part in that and using the chatbot. Why didn't you use it? What do you need? And then we got their opinions. We did another lean canvas and we rolled it back into new experiments. So you're constantly looping round and round and round between running something to get a number, looking at the trend, and then going back to see.
All right. Thank you.
Okay. Thanks, America.
Thank you. And we have the last question from Irene.
Hey, thanks, Leslie, for sharing your insights. They're really powerful. I just have one question with regards to testing the hypothesis, because there's so many different hypotheses, right? To test, like what would you suggest? How would you prioritize that?
The simplest, quickest one to test. So first of all, in terms of, if you mean which is the right hypothesis, we'll typically end up with one hypothesis per customer problem and solution. So if we've gone, for example, I want to drink coffee in the morning, so I'm grumpy. The solution is, you know, sell Leslie coffee 100 meters outside his door for $3. Then we create an hypothesis saying people of my demographic want to buy coffee like within 100 meters. That's our hypothesis. And then we go off, and the experiment that we run is the quickest possible experiment to validate or invalidate that. If your question is around, if there's multiple hypotheses, how do we prioritize? Start with the one that if it fails, you stop. All work on that idea. So meaning, what is the hardest problem you're trying to solve in that case? So if we can't get this thing to work, there's no point in continuing with anything else.
Okay, cool. Thank you very much.
Okay, great.
you. Any other questions?
Mandy, have we answered Mandy? Mandy, is Mandy still on the call? Yeah, it's good to see you, Mandy. Mandy's was at ANU and we did a lot of work together. Good to see you.
Good to see you too, mate.
Did we answer your question, Mandy?
Yeah, I think you addressed it a couple of questions ago, just basically making sure that people are confident about being told no, that their idea might not actually be that shiny or that fantastic.
Yeah.
Definitely something that you need to get buy-in from the executive, at least in my experience, and I'm sure that would be mirrored in your own.
Yeah. Thanks, Mandy.
Thank you. So if no more questions, then I would like to thank Leslie for the great presentation. I learned a lot, and I'm sure that everyone else, because there were so many questions. So that's thank you very much for the presentation. Yeah.
Thanks so much. It was a lot of fun, and happy to connect with you after this on any channel. If you've got any more questions, and I'm sure you will have, hit me up. And don't forget to fill in the feedback form, and
Correct.
I will send you a book wherever you are in the world, and see how that goes.
Thank you. And
Thank you, Leslie.
thank everyone.
Thanks, America. Good to see
Thank
you, man.
you.
Thank you.
Cheers.
Thanks, that was awesome.
Thanks,
Yeah,
everybody.
well done, Leslie.
Thanks, Leslie. Thanks, Rajesh.
Thank you.
Bye, everyone.
Bye.
Thanks,
Thank
guys.
you all. Thanks, Rajesh. Thanks, Leslie.
Thank you.
Cheers, Asim. Thank you. You've got a baby prototyper there.
It was good. Thank you.
Thanks, Rajesh. I appreciate the opportunity. It was great. I had a lot of fun.
Yeah, well, it was. I wasn't sure whether we will have a lot of questions or not, but looks like people were engaged. Yeah,
Yeah, yeah.
it's very good. Although that's my experience as well. That out of 100 people, it's only 30%. So this was perfectly, I was actually when we had like 50 people, and I wasn't too pleased.